from some of our depletions in the Platte River near Kearney, Nebraska. So those are all benefits that we see directly from this Platte River recovery program, and I'm glad to see that we're extending the increment. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Jan. Let's move on to agenda item number 14. I believe Suzanne.
Thanks, Director Jan, for that. Now that we're on agenda item 14, Suzanne Sellers for the record. I'm going to kick this agenda item off and then hand it over to Linda. A couple of the updates I wanted to talk about with the different wild and scenic stakeholder groups. If you recall, at the last board meeting, the River Protection Work Group in the Southwest gave us a tour. Amazingly, 2 days later, they had a meeting and things ended up dissolving for the time being. They've been working on a regional package that included language for a federal bill, and there's a couple of sticking points that the parties have not yet been able to reach conclusion, and I think they're a little tired and maybe a little hot that day, and so one thing led to another, and they decided to disband the group and not pursue monies to work on their iron fen study. I don't have any intel on this, but my optimistic side believes that they work so hard and their package is so close that at some point when the time is right, I personally hope that they're going to come back together. And so that's, I have a little candle lit for them, and I hope they come back together sooner rather than later. Another one of the developments I wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about the Royal Gorge BLM field office. You commented on their suitability report recently, and right now the BLM is considering all the cooperating agency comments, and they've invited water users in the basin to have a special meeting to discuss wild and scenic issues. And the hope is that the BLM is going to come to this meeting with language that maybe the water community can feel comfortable with. It hasn't happened yet, should happen in the next week or two, and so our fingers crossed for that. And so we're not sure if those water users are going to want to use funds from the Wild and Scenic Fund. If this meeting works out and gets traction, it may not be needed. We'll just have to wait and see. And then another update is the Rio Grande National Forest. They're also looking at a plan revision, and last I've heard is that they're going to be coming out with some sort of a wild and scenic related report later this summer. And so we should know more about they're going to go. And then recently the department got invited to cooperate with the Forest Service, the Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, and Gunnison National Forests are doing a combined plan. And so we'll start to track that plan and see how there's any impacts on wild and scenic issues. Does anybody have any questions on those topics before I hand it over to Linda?
Questions for Suzanne? I think we're ready for the other part.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Linda Bassi with the Stream and Lake Protection Section. Thanks. I am first going to just update you a little bit about the Lower Dolores Plan Working Group. I think you all know the big news was the managed releases from McPhee Reservoir, and attached to your memo you have this nice colorful flyer that gives you an overview of what was done. And so they did a lot of data collection and monitoring, and we'll be looking at the results of that and having some public meetings to discuss the results of that, including late this year or early next year. There will be a full Dolores River Dialogue meeting, which they haven't had for a long time. That's a much larger group than the Lower Dolores Plan Working Group, to talk about all the work that they've been doing, including the legislative effort, and to also look at the upcoming year to see if it's a good water year, perhaps they can do those managed releases again. And so I wanted to show you a video that was put together by some organizations that have been working collaboratively within this group, including one of our own board members, Celine.
Project, and we have enough water to do college.
This year, to see really a pretty big water coming down the river with a managed release over probably 60 days, that is a great opportunity. Water that's flowing into McPhee Reservoir from the Dolores River upstream, that's in excess of the demand. The capacity of the reservoir is only so big. This is water in excess of that capacity.
As part of the Nature Conservancy,
To allow for that possibility. Staff, Carly Brown, Suzanne Sellers, and I worked on this, kind of a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And we, in addition to tweaking the language, we did some revising just to make this a clearer document and to reflect how it's been used and to put a little more definition into it about stakeholder groups and what they do. However, we've had several conversations with board members, and we don't believe that this is ready to go. We think we need to have some more discussion on it and do some more work on it and decide what direction to go with it. Also, a closer look at the statute indicates that we cannot fund a stakeholder group that is solely pursuing a wild and scenic designation. That it was authorized about groups who are pursuing alternatives to the and wild and scenic designation. So with that, I think that a little discussion about this, but we are not going to ask you to take any action on it today.
All right, thanks, Linda. There's two different ways we can do this. We can have some input with Linda now, can individualize this offline. Which would the board prefer to do at this point in time? I've got one offline. Would you like to provide Linda with some feedback and then take it, Director George?
I would turn the question around. We have but I'm fine either way. But Linda, if you want to have us to have conversations, then I'll do that. That would be fine.
If you have any thoughts on it, meeting, we'd be happy to hear them, but we also can just reach out to you individually.
I think what we're hearing here is let's do this offline, and we will provide you with some feedback, and because we're not pressed with this issue today, so
right, it's not an urgent need.
Have a little bit of more time to refine it, so to speak.
I think it will be better if we put some more thought and take some more time on it. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, Linda. Let's move on to agenda item number 15, Water Supply Reserve Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board. Congratulate and welcome all of our new members. And I'd like to add a note that I've made some revisions to the materials in your packet, and I will see that those get record. This is agenda item 15A. It is an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Metro and South Basin Roundtables. The applicant and grantee is the Colorado Water Assembly for the project titled South Platte Basin Education Coordinator. The purpose of this application is to assist the South Platte Basin Roundtable and the Metro Roundtable in support of an education coordinator to oversee internal roundtable and external stakeholder educational activities as the roundtables proceed to implement their education action plan, the South Platte Basin Implementation Plan, and Colorado's Water Plan. The position will also serve as a public education participation and outreach, or PEPO, liaison for the roundtables, and will work to carry out the responsibilities of the PEPO work group. The coordinator will provide regular progress reports to the roundtables, establish sound working relationships and cooperative arrangements with watershed stakeholders, and enhance collaboration amongst those with goals that align with those of Colorado's Water Plan and the Basin Implementation Plan. This position will represent the roundtable at community events, compile and create outreach materials that can be used by this or future education coordinators and roundtable members. And they will respond to stakeholder inquiries. Funds will also be used to support the upkeep and maintenance of the South Platte Basin webpage and website to provide necessary materials and supplies to accomplish the objectives noted above and to provide communication and travel reimbursements to the education coordinator. No additional needs or issues have been identified. There are no matching funds as this is a roundtable initiated effort and is associated with their Basin Implementation Plan. If approved, Megan Holcomb will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Metro account and $25,000 from the South Platte Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Unfortunately, no members of either roundtable are able to attend today's meeting. However, I will do my best to answer any questions or address any concerns you may have.
Questions for Craig. Director Wells.
Actually, I don't have a question. I did receive a phone call from Barbara Biggs, who asked me to apologize on behalf of both roundtables for the inability to get someone here today. But this does seem to be the sort of height of non-controversial WSRA grant. In dipping my toe just a little tiny bit into all the things that we got on SWAZI last night, it appears that the Basin Roundtables will have some very significant work to do once the SWAZI information has been gathered. So it seems that outreach and education is going to be even more important going forward, perhaps, than it has been in the past. If someone else has an objection, I would move this staff's recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Wells. Second by Director Yon to move staff recommendation, agenda item 15A. Further discussion? Director Yon.
I just want to say that I have the same sentiment from the South Platte Basin Roundtable that they were sorry no one else could come, but I am a member of the Roundtable, so I'm here, and we've been looking at this. We've been looking at this for quite a while, and we've kind of we're following in the Arkansas Basin's footsteps. They seem to have good success with an education coordinator, and so that's one of the models that we've been using with the Arkansas Basin Roundtable, and we just have a big need, as Director Wells said, for education within our basin. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of people to educate in our basin. So we're looking forward to doing this. At the last roundtable meeting, we had a group from the Poudre River come to right in Fort Collins, and they came to our roundtable, and they're building a new education center, and they wanted to incorporate the South Platte Basin Implementation Plan in that. And we're all volunteers, so we don't have time to each of us go and meet with these people. So this will be a good opportunity for someone representing our roundtable to go and help them so that our Basin Implementation Plan is put into some of these educational programs. So we're pretty excited about being able to do that.
Discussion. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is agenda item 15B. It is an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Colorado Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Grand County Irrigated Land Company for the project titled Vale Ditch Water Management Improvements. The purpose of this application is to assist the Grand County Irrigated Land Company in replacing the Grand County Irrigated Land Company's partial flume in Strawberry Creek that was damaged during a high water event in 2010. The damaged flume will be removed from the stream channel and 100 feet of stream habitat will be restored above and below the flume. The new flume will be designed by the Natural Resources Conservation Service to satisfy bypass high flows. The project will also include the procurement and installation of a staged discharge recorder and telemetry system that will allow for cost-effective, continuous, real-time monitoring of the water released from Meadow Creek Reservoir and provide the District 51 Water Commissioner with water flow data. Staff will work with the applicant to secure all funding letters of commitment. Otherwise, no issues or additional needs have been identified. We're only missing one letter, and so there might be a note in yours saying that there was 2 letters missing, but we're just waiting on one, and we won't enter into a contract until we receive that letter of commitment. The applicant and third parties are providing a cash and in-kind match of $12,000, which is approximately 52% of the total project cost, and they otherwise meet the matching requirements. If approved, Megan Holcomb will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $11,000 from the Colorado Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Unfortunately, the applicant was unable to attend today's meeting. However, I'll do my best to take any questions or address any concerns. Thank you.
Director George.
Mr. Chairman, if there is no discussion, I'd make the motion that we adopt staff recommendation on item 15B.
Been moved by Director George. Second by Director Gallagher to move staff recommendation, agenda item 15B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is agenda item 15C. It is an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Leon Lake Ditch and Reservoir Company for the project titled Leon Lake Reservoir / Dam Groin Seep Hole Repair Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Leon Lake Ditch and Reservoir Company repair an existing dam abutment on Leon Lake and henceforth removing an existing state engineer's fill restriction. This facility provides irrigation water for a portion of the southern Grand Mesa and the 5,000-acre Surface Creek Valley Farm. In addition, Leon Lake provides domestic supplies to the town of Cedar Ridge and Orchard, as well as the Upper Surface Creek Domestic Water Users Association and Colby Domestic Water. The proposed repairs include excavation and stockpiling of materials, applying resin grout, compaction, installation of fabric and pond liners, backfilling, engineering and geotechnical inspections, and site cleanup. No issues or additional needs have been identified. The applicant is providing a cash match of approximately $41,000, which is approximately about 50% of the total project cost, and they exceed the matching requirements. If approved, I will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $41,000 from the Gunnison Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Our president of the Leon Lake Ditch and Reservoir Company is here today, and we're both available to take questions or address any concerns you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Craig? Would you like to address the board, Jerry?
Simply on behalf of the Leon Lake Ditch and Reservoir Company, I'd like to thank the staff and the Gunnison Basin Roundtable for the superb and outstanding assistance they've given us in providing or filling out this application and getting us to this point. Greg has been super. I spent a lot of time with him on the phone, and he's been really great and help us out. I thank you very much.
Questions for Jerry. Director McLeod.
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman, but if there are no other questions from the board, I would move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Been moved by Director McLeod. I'm sorry. Second by Director Yon to move staff recommendation, agenda item 15C. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And if I could, Craig, just for a second, thank you for being up here today, Jerry. We really appreciate it. So, go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is agenda item 15D. It is an action item and a grant request recommended for approval by the Southwest Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Big Stick Ditch Company for the project titled Lightner Creek Canal Improvement and Water Efficiency Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the Big Stick Ditch Company in cleaning and regrading 8,000 feet of the Lightner Creek Canal within its existing right-of-way from the Sawmill Canyon Headgate to the La Plata River. This current system experiences over 70% losses due to seepage. Efforts will include lining sections of the canal bottom and sides with soil amendments of bentonite and lime, while portions traversing gravel and fractured rock will be treated with sackcrete to prevent further seepage. 5 culvert pipes with hand wheel control gates will be installed along the ditch to allow draining in winter months, helping to prevent erosion. Staff will work with the applicant to secure all funding letters of commitment. Otherwise, no issues or additional needs have been identified. The applicant and third parties are providing a cash and in-kind match of over $60,000, which is 60% of the total project cost, and they meet or exceed the matching requirements. If approved, Megan Holcomb will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $30,000 from the Southwest Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Unfortunately, the applicant is unable to attend today's meeting. However, I'm here to take any questions or address any concerns you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Craig? Hearing none. Director Hawkins.
I would make a motion to adopt the staff recommendation on item 15D.
It's been moved to approve staff recommendation. Second by Director Gallagher to approve staff recommendation for agenda item 15D. Is there any further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is agenda item 15E. It is an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Metro Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is Denver Trout Unlimited for the study titled Biological and Ecological Benefits from Chatfield Reallocation Environmental Pool Increased Releases. The purpose of this application is to help fund a study by Denver Trout Unlimited to determine the biological and ecological benefits of additional flows by season in the South Platte River downstream from Chatfield Reservoir. Help in the development of a stream management plan that provides guidance on operational flow releases. The study takes previous evaluations to the next step of a multi-phase plan and will support both consumptive and non-consumptive needs throughout the metro and downstream areas and benefit many users and uses along the river corridor. The ultimate goal of this multi-phase plan is to develop a decision support matrix to understand how flows available through the Chatfield Reallocation Environmental Pool can be put to their most beneficial use downstream, taking into account time-varied flows and during which time of year the flows are most beneficial. No issues or additional needs have been identified. Third parties are providing a cash and in-kind match of $36,500, which is 78% of the study's total cost, and they exceed the matching requirements. If approved, Megan Holcomb will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $10,000 from the Metro account, and staff recommends approval. Unfortunately, the applicant was unable to attend today's meeting. However, I'm available to take questions or address any of your concerns. Thank you.
Questions for Craig? Director Wells.
I also have a comment. The environmental pool and Chatfield reallocation is obviously extremely important, and it does seem to me that a study of this type that will help determine how best to use that water, which we are collecting money for right now, would be beneficial to CPW as the owner of the environmental pool, and to all the participants along the river. So if there aren't questions, I would move the staff's recommendation on item 15E.
It's been moved by Director Wells.
Second.
Second by Director Yon to move agenda item 15E. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is agenda item 15F. It is an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Southwest Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the Mountain Studies Institute for the project titled Animas River Community Forum. The purpose of this application is to support the Animas River Community Forum in consolidating lessons learned from the Gold King mine emergency into a longer-term structure for outreach, information exchange, and coordinated monitoring based on multi-partner cooperation on the Animas River. The Animas River Community Forum will execute 4 main tasks this year. Coordinate information exchange among watershed partners at a bi-monthly meeting. Create an Animas River report card to provide community awareness of river health and resiliency issues. Increased awareness between the efforts and issues being addressed in the headwaters by Silverton and San Juan County, and efforts and concerns downstream in Durango, La Plata, and the Southern Ute Tribe, and maintain a coordinator to guide the group and manage actions and goals. The CWCB previously awarded a grant in the amount of $37,850 to the Mountain Studies Institute for 1 year of 2016. And the grantee successfully completed their obligations under the grant. So no issues or additional needs have been identified. The applicant and third parties are providing over $52,000 in cash and in kind, which is approximately 65% of the total project cost, and they exceed the matching requirements. If approved, Megan Holcomb will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $28,919 from the Southwest Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Unfortunately, the applicant was unable to attend today's meeting, but I'm here to take questions or address any concerns you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Craig? Hearing none. Director Hawkins.
There are no questions. I would move to adopt staff's recommendation on item 15E.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins, second by Director Gallagher, to move staff recommendation, agenda item 15F. Further discussion? All for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Chair, that concludes agenda item 15.
Very good. We'll move to agenda item number 16.
Good afternoon. Michelle Garrison, CWCB staff, for the record. This is agenda item 16. This is informational only. We wanted to give you an update on the status of the aquatic nuisance species funding for the next couple of years. So when we spoke to you last, we were talking about the loss of the severance tax Tier 2 funding for the aquatic nuisance species program. For those who are new to the board, CPW had been receiving approximately $4 to $4.5 million a year historically through those funds, and they were using those to run this boat inspections and monitoring and everything else needed for support for this program. With the loss of those funds in 2016 and 2017, CPW had to prioritize what they could get done within the program on some reserve funding, some reallocation of some of their funding for some other programs that they decided were less of a priority, and going to water users and other partners and asking for additional funds. So 2016 and 2017, they've been running on emergency funding. And then they were looking for long-term solutions. And they tried to run a bill last year in the legislature. That bill did not succeed. So they're looking again for this next year. But they did get a different bill. So they got a one-year bill instead of their long-term funding bill. Senate Bill 259 provided them approximately $4 million so they can run through 2018. The program almost fully funded, not quite, but almost fully funded through 2018, minus any emergencies in 2017 that arise. Well, they can tap into the funding in 2017 as well if they need to. In addition, partners, including federal agencies and water users, provided about $1.3 million for this 2017 season. So they asked their partners to step up, and they did. So looking ahead for the legislative session, they're still thinking about what's the best way to approach this problem. They want to balance some steady funding with the A&S funding that they get through the severance tax funding, because at some point in time that Tier 2 funding will come back. And so they may not need to fully fund the program through a steady source, but they need some combination that allows water users and other partners that have been helping to pay to know better how much they need from them each year so that their boards can budget and plan as well. And right now, one of the things they're thinking about is a $25 fee for boating as a registration fee, a license, a sticker, something like that. That's for motorized watercraft. So motorboats, sailboats. That does not include other recreational interests like paddleboarding, kayaks, and those types of recreational interests that also use the same resources, but it's not as clear how to ask that group to help fund this program. So I think discussions on what to do to try to get other recreational interests on board is ongoing. They're also going to increase fines for non-compliance. That won't generate a lot of money, but they're hoping to send the right message about the importance of this program. They see an increased need for this program, not only for the reservoirs that they're already supporting, but maybe for some new reservoirs in the future. Boat sales are up 9%, inspections are up 10%. They've already had some very expensive decontaminations this year that are eating into the budget. At least one of those came with a fine because it was intercepted from Utah. Been told in Utah it needed to go decontaminate, and they chose not to. They just headed for Colorado, contaminated, and they knew it, and then they broke down. So they were able to intercept that boat and get it decontaminated. But I think they're starting to get some regularly expensive decontamination. So looking ahead, they need to not only find ways to cover their existing budget, but look ahead to see what their future needs are going to be. The average number of intercepted contaminated boats was about 12 per year. In 2016, they had 22. They've already had 18 this year. And they said, unlike some past years, most of those were coming from the east. And so as we continue to be the only mussel-free state in the region, I think they're expecting continued pressure and a need to grow that program as they can in the future. In terms of things that we can do to help, which I believe was one of the requests of the board last time, they are going to discuss this at the Water Resources Review on August 2nd, and Review Committee, sorry. And they're also going to try to put this on the agenda for Water Congress both in the summer, this August in Steamboat, and again in January. And they're hoping to get a lot of support and a lot of feedback in terms of what to do with this year's bill and how they can garner support. I think the A&S part of the bill this year in their bill was widely supported. But CPW has several things they need to balance. They haven't increased fishing license fees in a long time or hunter license fees in a long time. So they need to look at that also. But then when those two bills got mixed together, I think there was concern about this great big bill. And so they might run those as two separate bills next year. And then this concern about hunting and fishing license fees are an established program. They know how to collect that money. They know how to budget that money. But they're getting a lot of new recreational interests that are using those same resources that they don't have a mechanism to have those people help pay for the cost. And I think they would welcome input as to appropriate ways to work on that as well. So that's my quick update. Do we have any questions?
Questions for Michelle? Good presentation.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's move to agenda item number 17.
Thank you. For the record, Carly Brown, Colorado Water Conservation Board. So I'm here for an annual update on our what we call the Basin Fund MOA. It's the Memorandum of Understanding executed in 2011 between the 4 Upper Colorado River Basin states, in Utah and New Mexico, along with Reclamation, the Western Area Power Administration, and CREDA, the Colorado River Energy Distributors Association. So we do this update annually, but there's some bubbling issues that I'm going to get into lately, that has come up in the past several months. So let me first give you an overview of what the MOA is and what it does, and then we'll talk about some of the things that that might be of particular interest to the board. So the purpose of the Basin Fund MOA is to use power revenues that are generated through Colorado River Storage Project Act, or CRISP Act projects, and to fund projects that would further the purposes of the CRISP Act itself. So this could include elective operation, maintenance, and replacement. It could include expanding snow tell or stream gauges, studies of consumptive use, basin studies, climate change modeling, certain environmental compliance and mitigation activities, that type of thing. The MOA funding is projected to total $161 million between its inception back in 2011 and its conclusion in 2025. Colorado's proportion of the funding is 46%, so that totals out to $74 million. We've been really proactive in identifying projects for our state, so we're already at 90% of the total allotment of that funding has been decided upon and allocated to those funds. Not all expended, but we're making significant progress on moving forward with our allotment under the Basin Fund MOA. So in comparison to our 90%, other states vary between 25% and 68%. So we're doing really good on that front. And I should also say that's much to the credit of Dave Kanzer at the Colorado River District and Bruce Whitehead at the Southwestern Water Conservancy District, very close partners on the expenditure or identifying projects and helping get good projects on the ground for this funding. So the process of identifying those projects for Colorado is to determine with the River District and Southwest what projects are sort of top of mind and get those submitted to Reclamation in coordination with the Upper Colorado River Commission every July. This July, since we're so close to our full allotment of expenditures and because of the percolating issues that I'll describe in a minute, we decided not to submit any projects for this year. But I can tell you a little bit about projects that we funded in the past so you have an example of what we're doing, and you can read the full list of what those projects would be in item 17 of your board notebook. We've funded in the past are replacement of pumps to be used to pressurize irrigation water for the Dolores project, of the Silverjack Dam outlet works for the Bostic Park project, improvements at the Ucumpragre East Canal that's now designed and it's going to be going into construction in fall of 2017. Really special that the Ucumpragre East Canal improvement highlights is that these Basin Fund dollars are power revenues, and it's really ultimately the state funds, and so they're not federal funds. They can be used in matching for federal programs, and that's what's going on with the RCPP funding in the Gunnison, to use the Basin Fund MOA non-federal money to match the federal RCPP money. So let's see, skimming back through my notes. Now I'll get into the issue. Well, first I'll ask, are there any questions? I ran through that really quickly, but in general, we think this has been a really productive opportunity for Colorado and all of the basin states to make the most of these basin funds and to help support improvements at CRISP facilities.
Questions for Carly at this point in time? Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So the percolating issue that I've described is what we're referring to as the rescission of projects. Back in September of last year, the Reclamation sent us a letter, and others in the Upper Colorado River Basin, but it was really affecting Colorado first and foremost. Sent a letter that rescinded approval of multiple projects that had been previously approved. The two districts that really were most affected by the rescission were the Bostic Park project and the Silt project. The other projects sort of had some middle ground, some places that we can refine and go forward and refine these projects. But for Bostic Park and for Silt, there were a couple of projects that they had put forth that were just completely rescinded. So we've had a couple of meetings with Reclamation to try to move forward on this, on what happened. What happened basically is that Reclamation did a review with its solicitors and determined that the facilities to receive funds under the MOA needed to be fully federally owned CRISP facilities and participating projects. And for Bostic Park, for example, that project is a combination of federally and privately owned, and so Reclamation did not feel comfortable proceeding with doing the proposed work on a non-federally owned facility. So this was not the prior understanding of the states regarding how to approach the projects. And it appears that the Reclamation staff that MOA now were not the exact same staff that helped negotiate the agreement several years ago. So as such, there was a possible disconnect that CWCB and the other parties had, and now we're trying to correct. The steps that we've taken so far is we had a meeting, a high-level meeting between Commissioner James Eklund and Brent Reese and several other principals on the Colorado River. Brent Reese from Reclamation to have to sort of sort out, first of all, is this a misunderstanding? Where do we go from here? I think that from the process side of things, the rescission letter sort of being abrupt and unexpected for the states, that's something that Reclamation promised to work better on, in that spirit of trying not to take us by surprise with this type of issue again. I think that there's a lot of agreement that they want to work with us. In that spirit, the states and Reclamation, WAPA, and CRETA got together actually the day after the March board meeting and sat down and talked about sort of how they interpret the administration of the MOA. What came out of, I think I was not at that meeting, but I've heard really good things about the willingness to work together. The takeaway from, well, the homework assignment from that meeting was for the states to review a standard operating criteria document and a proposed eligibility criteria document for future MOA projects, and to redline that and get that back to Reclamation and meet back in October. We have a meeting scheduled for October 11th. And we've also discussed the case-by-case process for considering projects that have that combination of federal and non-federal ownership, such as those that were rescinded. And we're continuing to advocate for an approach that will help optimize the intended use, that help optimize the use of the basin funds as fully intended in the MOA. So the summary from my standpoint, right at this point, is that we're sort of in the middle of getting those red lines back to Reclamation. We're doing some final details. Most all of the states in the Upper Basin have looked at the document and offered some very substantial red lines that will address this issue going forward. We are sort of at a pause point. We're waiting for a little bit more feedback, and we're almost ready to send, but we have had a request from water users to take a closer look because they're the ones affected by this on the ground. And we're going to hear from Dave Kanzer from the River District, because he's intimately familiar with these projects on the ground, and then also from Dick Bratton, who's here helping represent Bostic Park, to speak to what this really means from Bostic Park's perspective. And Dick has asked for sharing of those red line documents. To this point, they've been contained within the states in the UCRC fold. And I think that we as staff just want to, first of all, run all of our chats with our partner states and the Upper Colorado River Commission, but we think that there is useful input to be had from the water users. So I'll come back before the board and ask for some direction after you've heard from all of them. So, but before I step aside and ask BK to give you a little bit of an overview, is there anything that I can clarify in my remarks just now? Any questions?
Any questions for Carly at this point? Director Gallagher.
Thanks, Carly. Are any projects that are out there today that haven't been rescinded in danger of any kind of clawback, or have any funds been transferred to projects that don't meet these eligibility requirements?
I don't think that anything beyond what had already been the rescinded projects that we learned about in September are in danger at this point.
Clawback exposure. At this
I'm
point.
not that we no.
Director Hawkins.
Thank you, Carly. I had a question about getting water user input. Are you also going to be seeking that input from other water user entities in the basin?
The approach that we would recommend at this point is to limit this to the river district in the Southwest district, that since they help identify projects that's on the ground, and those projects that are directly affected by the rescission letter, because we think that that will have a more targeted approach to the analysis of these red lines, which I can tell you are already pretty substantive, and I do think get at the issue. But again, this is a question that we're bringing before the board right now.
Thanks. It wasn't clear to me that the Southwest District was also being consulted.
Further discussion. I think that's got us for just a minute, Carly.
All right, I'll ask Dave Kanzer to appear before the board now to talk a little bit about the type of projects that have been rescinded.
Good afternoon again. For the record, Dave Kanzer, Colorado River District. I think, or I know, Carly just an overview of the situation. I just want to fill in a few, not really blanks, but give a little bit more foundation to the issue and the importance of this issue. So, what's at stake here, as you heard, is millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, for the same theme that I talked about earlier, modernizing agricultural infrastructure to really bring these facilities into the 21st century. These funds are critically important, and there's been a great deal of planning that's been done by these participating projects. And the participating projects is a term used in the Colorado River Storage Project Act. They specifically outlined a process that these power revenues would be directed for operation, maintenance, and replacement for these facilities, and to also support and essentially subsidize these agricultural practices with these funds. Essentially what we at the River District think that Reclamation is doing here is really taking away a lot of the flexibility from these districts to do some of their highly prioritized projects. Now, a little bit of history without going too deep is, almost every single one of these participating projects started out as a private project, and Reclamation saw fit to invest in these projects under the 1956 and 68 Acts to improve and incorporate already existing facilities and add storage and add conveyance and the ability to put this water to beneficial use. Bostwick Park and Siltwater Conservancy District in particular, those were existing. Again, Reclamation came in and said, we'll help you build a reservoir, a pump station, and we'll get you additional supplemental supplies to make these existing historical projects and to make sure agriculture is sustainable. So really, it's these projects we've always looked at as, although they're blended, they're essentially integrated projects authorized under these acts, and this is really the only source of revenue for improvement of these facilities. So what Reclamation has done is drawn a bright line between those projects that were essentially predating the federal action and investment, and those districts and projects that were fortunate enough to have the right language in those agreements to legally combine them. And that, in some of those examples, the North Fork had the same history, but the agreement that was put together explicitly conveyed things to Reclamation, legally conveyed ownership and right-of-ways and those sort of things. Park and Silt, those T's and I's were not quite completed, dotted, and crossed. And so we have a hybrid project, and reclamation is essentially taking a very strict interpretation of that bright line, and in fact will, to the detriment of these districts, won't allow them to utilize those funds in a way that would modernize and help those systems become more efficient. Excuse me, more efficient. So with that sort of put in place, we are working through channels. We have, I think, an excellent relationship with reclamation, with you all, and we want to again applaud your staff and your board. John McLeod personally has been very much involved in this, and James. And so we're not just sitting on our hands, but what I think we would like to ask is for additional political policy support to elevate this, and really appreciate your time and consideration to do so. There's no real specific ask at this time. We don't want to upset the apple cart. We want to go through channels, but we do want you to hear from representatives of the water districts, and I think Dick Bratton is ready to do that for Bostwick Park in particular. Bostwick, you know, I want to reiterate, Siltwater Conservancy District and the Florida District are also impacted by this decision, as well as other states in the upper Colorado River Basin. And so we're working on this together, and I really appreciate your time to discuss that further. And if there's other more specifics you want to ask about or discuss, I'm happy to do so.
Dave, thank you very much. That's a very good description of a very bad situation. So I'm thoroughly familiar with the silt issue. I sat on that board for years, and of course there wouldn't be a silt project had it not been for the partnership, private ranchers and the federal government. So it's just ridiculous, but typical. So it deserves our total support backing you and your team. And I, for one, would be anxious to know what you want us to do when.
Well,
that's my view. We can talk about it together as a board when the time comes, but we should be planning to weigh in to help you there.
Thanks, yeah, and I'll defer for your discussion. But again, I think that the general request is this political support, this cooperative, unified approach, and probably some legal support too. And I should mention Karen's been quite helpful as well, looking at the language in the acts, trying to figure out, paragraph 5, how we can, go through that again without getting in the weeds, how we can reinterpret or find the legal basis and a policy basis to make this, to turn reclamation's mind in the right direction. So should I turn it over to Charlie or Dick? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
I'll Dick Bratton on behalf of Bostwick Park.
Thank you for letting me participate in this. When I left the office this morning, I didn't realize I was practicing law, so I didn't bring my lawyer uniform. So bear with me. We really appreciate Carly and David really described the issue very. I could probably sit down right now. I won't, but they really did articulate the issues. And I think I'll just take it another notch. As you can imagine, as Russ said, he knows about silt. This is really hurting them. We were talking about several $1 million of impact. These projects are 50 years old, and they're going to wear out, and they need the money. And it was, in my opinion, there was never any discussion, and I'll give away my age, but I started working with CRISPA in June of 1959 when the Upper Gunnison was created in the office, the lawyer I was working for. And I've been involved in them all those years since, including 8 years on a commission. I don't remember ever hearing anything about this distinction. And if you look at Section 5, it talks about construction, operation, and maintenance. So if it's not proper to spend federal funds on a non-federal project, they shouldn't have spent the money to build it. I don't see any distinction in the statute. So I think that what we would ask specifically, and Carly has already suggested that as one of the participants that we be allowed to participate, one of the things we'd like to do would be provide input on the red line memo that they're drafting before you give it to the Bureau. We'd like to have some input. You won't have anything to say on it. As a part of a ongoing forward strategy, it may well be that we may want to participate, possibly go to the Bureau ahead of time by ourselves, but with part of the strategy with everybody to feel out what their thinking is before we take the next step. But we wouldn't do it without this. We're not intending to go out and do it on our own. Another issue, this is a technical one, and I'm not really pushing it, but in terms of whether we're a client or not for the board and for the Attorney General's office, I don't know if we technically are, if it even makes any difference. If you need that, we'd obviously have to give a non-disclosure agreement, so it wouldn't be any problem with that. But I'd just like to thank you again, and I would hope, let me take it one step further than either David or Carly. I think there ought to be a resolve to take whatever measure it takes to solve this. If it means going to your congressman to push it, they don't start there. I'm not suggesting that. These are last resorts. But that the first thing you do is exactly what they're doing, is try to negotiate with them. It's my understanding from some of the Bureau people, I heard this all secondhand, isn't everybody in the Bureau agrees with this position, that it has to be a federal project. And then if you feel frustrated and no hope at that point, I would hope that you do have the resolve to take political action, if necessary, maybe even legal action. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you'd like.
At this time, I'll call on Director McLeod.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question for Mr. Bratton, but you know, as Dave pointed out, I have been involved in some of these conversations with the Bureau, and I think Brent Reese in particular, who's the director of the Upper Colorado region for the Bureau, is sympathetic to the problem, but he has lawyers whispering in his ears from the solicitor's office, and that's where part of the problem comes. But I'd like to recommend that we direct the staff to include the affected water users and the River District and the Southwest District in this revision redlining process in the criteria. And if that requires a motion, that would be my motion right now.
There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second for that? Second by Director George. I am a little bit in a difficult position because I'm not near as eloquent as Director McLeod. Everyone,
Have him repeat it.
That would be an excellent idea. Thank you, Director George.
I will be happy to repeat it. I would like staff, and to the extent that we can, the Attorney General's office, to include the affected water users, Silt, Bostwick Park, Florida, and the River District and the Southwest District, who we work closely with in recommending projects, to include those folks in recommending revisions to the Bureau of Reclamation in these red line documents. Continue to coordinate with the other Upper Basin states and the Upper Colorado River Commission, but these folks can provide input that may be unique, and they should be included in the process. So I move that we direct the staff to include them.
Heard the motion. It's been properly seconded by Director George. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Along that line, when Gunnison had a Gunnison project, which never did meet the feasibility, but we worked closely. The River District was with us all the way, money and legal and political and the whole thing, and I'm sure that's true of the others. So I totally agree with the Southwest and the Colorado River District getting involved. They've been instrumentally involved from day one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. All right.
I can just finish up, Director Wattenberg?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for your attention and direction to this. I can tell that this is something that is very much engaged the board, and we will update you in September and especially following our meeting in October about the progress on this issue. Thank you.
All right, we're a little bit ahead of the schedule here. We have agenda item number 18. At this time, I will call on Director Chartrand.
Thank you, Chairman Wattenberg. The AG's report is in the board materials, and I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have. And if you're going to like surprise me when you actually do have a question, but I become prepared. If there are no questions pursuant to statute, I recommend that the board make a motion to go into executive session after a break to consider items 19A through D. As identified on the board's agenda, this session is authorized pursuant to the provisions of Section 24-64023A2 of the Colorado Revised Statutes.
Motion by Director Gallagher. Second by Director Yon to move into executive session. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are now in executive session. We will take a short break and then proceed from there.
executive session, agenda item number 20, and pursuant to statute, the board went into executive session to consider agenda items 19A through D. Discussion during the executive session was limited to those items, and no final decisions were made during the executive session.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 21.
Great. Thank you, Director Wattenberg. Agenda item 21, this is House Bill 16-1228, Criteria and Guidelines for Agricultural Water Protection Programs. I'm Greg Johnson with CWCB staff, Water Supply Planning Section. So this is an item that you guys have seen as a board for the 4th time now as of today. I first introduced this officially in November of last year. You had some discussion, of course, prior to that when this was still working its way through the legislature. This is a bill that passed in 2016, not to be confused with 1248, another similar bill that Director Goebel is intimately familiar with. That's the Least Fallow Tool pilot program. This is also designed as an ATM tool, a new alternative agricultural transfer method. This is really the kind of evolution of the flex bill that you may have heard of. That was discussed for a number of years prior and then did pass in 2016. So for the sake of the new board members, I'll give another quick update. This is an action item for the board today. We do recommend as staff approval of the criteria and guidelines for the establishment of an agricultural water protection program in Water Division 1 or 2 for the implementation of an agricultural water protection water right as allowed by House Bill 16-1228. So that is staff recommendation. The criteria and guidelines were originally presented, again, at the January board meeting. We had public meetings in each of the divisions. We had 2 in each of Division 1 and Division 2, so this legislation only applies to Division 1 and 2. 2 meetings in each of those divisions in early April. We worked very closely with Director Ryan and his staff on the other end of this. So the criteria and guidelines that you will be considering today are just on the actual continued irrigation use aspect of this. So the way it's set up, it's a little bit complicated, but the bill envisions this new kind of water right called an agricultural water protection water right that allows you to change up to 50% of the historical consumptive use of the water right to be used for non-agricultural purposes. So that's the flexible piece. That's the part that you can then lease down the road. At the time you do the change, you don't even need to identify what that use is. That is all governed by the Substitute Water Supply Plan per the rules that Director Ryan mentioned earlier that he is taking to court at the end of the month or early in August of this year. On the other end, the bill does state very clearly that that 50% has to be ensured that that stays in continued irrigation use. And so that's what these programs would do, is ensure that that continued irrigation use does take place. The main thing to understand here is that there are 2 ways to check that box in order to verify that that continued irrigation use is taking place. One of them is this new thing called these agricultural water protection programs that would be established through these criteria and guidelines. The other is through any sort of established conservation easement, whether that's federal, state, or local, that of course doesn't otherwise encumber that water right. If that water right is tied to the land, of course you're out of luck. You can't then lease that. But if you are enrolled in a conservation easement, the box set up by the statute, you don't even need to be a part of this particular new thing. So the board documentation that I had for you includes just a very short summary, a 1-page summary memo, and then dives right into the actual document, the criteria and guidelines document. It's a fairly simple 5-page document. The main components of the bill, 4 sections of it. Sections to before you today. So that's CWCB developing the criteria and guidelines to help ensure that water stays in agriculture that is not leased. Section 2 speaks to the state engineer promulgating rules to guide the approval of the new use through the Substitute Water Supply Plan. Section 3 is the requirements of the change case, the statutory allowance for the change, and the statutory allowance for use through the Substitute Water Supply Plan. And then Section 4 creates that new SWSP statute. So the criteria and guidelines, again, I have draft up here. It's not approved yet, but very simple overview. The document walks through the kind of the purpose and background for all of this. So a substantial portion of the document, actually the first few pages, really sets the stage, given the complexity of this, just trying to explain what this thing is. The criteria and guidelines proper start on page 3, and we have each of the different sections for that, kind of walking through the submittal process, the board review process, the standard of denial and suspension, monitoring. As far as timing, the CWCB is required to approve this by October of this year. Given the requirements of the statute, it had to be within 1 year of initiating the process, which we took to mean establishing our kind of stakeholder feedback group that was created in October of last year with Division of Water Resources. We've got Attorney General's Office. Jen Mealy has done a ton of work on this as well, so we've all been working on this together. So the scope, again, this lays out kind of the background and what these are. And there are those two options that you have, either conservation programs or this new agricultural water protection program that I have highlighted in red. An eligible entity, so it is envisioned that this new program would not just be created out of the blue, it would basically be housed within an existing entity. So this defines what that entity is: a water conservation district, conservancy district, irrigation district, and so on. And that I won't belabor these unless you want to talk about some of these specifics again. But the eligible entity must submit this proposal to create this new program that includes all of these different things. So these things are what were negotiated very carefully with the stakeholder group that we had, a lot of the folks that were involved in the original discussion and evolution of the bill. And then this is a lot of the stuff that we had talked about at those public meetings that we had in each of. So things, all the details that need to be included about how you would monitor to ensure that that continued irrigation use is still occurring, legal descriptions, photos, maps, things like that. Reporting details. And the way this is envisioned is that there would be an annual reporting process. A lot of the feedback that we got on this was to keep it as simple as possible, let it be kind of a local program. So kind of minimize that oversight, have an annual report, have a lot of the necessary details in there. Obviously, we don't have staff to go out there and monitor this. Certainly, the water commissioners have many other things to do. This is not a new, new task for them. So it's all set up through existing districts, existing irrigation companies. And then the CWCB review process, a fairly simple 6-step process. Once we have these new proposals to create these new programs, we would post those. We would provide, or the sponsoring entity would provide written notice of the proposed program. Parties would submit comments within 30 days. We'd respond to the comments, potentially request additional information, and then the board would approve or deny the proposed agricultural water protection program. The applicant of the decision within 10 days. We do have Section 3C in the criterion guidelines is the standard of denial and suspension. Basically, if this is not working, if the program is not ensuring that continued irrigation use is occurring, for suspending that approval. And of course, coordinating with the Division of Water Resources. And then finally, the monitoring. A lot of this ties back to the earlier section, but just making sure that by December 31st, annually, every year, we have the nature of the inspections, inspection forms, all this information that we need to have on file at CWCB. And then we, of course, report back to the board how these are being used, how they're operating. And that's it in a very quick summary, but I'm happy to dive into any of the details on this. Did not want to belabor this too much since you've seen it a number of times already. But
questions for Greg? Director Wells.
I just want to make, I definitely don't want details. I want to make sure I have the context. So the statute created a new water right, which someone has to go and get. And then when they have the water right, the way to ensure that half the water stays in agriculture is either they enter one of these easement programs or they do this program that this board would approve. If they want to use it, they get a temporary substitute water supply plan from the state engineer. That should be easy enough. Okay. I just want to make sure I understand program versus right versus whatever. Okay.
Sure. And it's fairly complicated. We did have a much longer presentation for the public meetings that did a much better job walking through that process, how things were sequenced in there.
Further questions? Hearing none, if this is an action item, Director Wells.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Wells, second by Director Goebel. to move staff recommendation, agenda item 21. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 22.
Good afternoon, Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. Director Wattenberg, it is football season, so I start thinking in terms of being a football coach. And I see the glassy eyes on the board. I was wondering if you wanted me to pull out my football whistle, the board do some calisthenics to maybe move some blood around. If not, I guess I'll proceed.
Let's proceed.
Okay.
That might be.
Very good.
I don't want to see that. So.
Thank you, Ty.
We could on the football field. I have the players go run and touch the flagpole, which isn't too far in your case.
Yeah,
so.
I can do that.
All right.
All
right.
End, no.
Real quick, report that we do at each board meeting. We are July, which is the very first board meeting of the fiscal year, and so we're kind of in a gap here. What I'd like to do is provide the final report of last year. Going forward, it's really more in a budget sense. It's not necessarily the normal process. So what I've handed out is I'll call it the final for last year, although we still have money that's not accounted for as it trickles in after July 1. It will eventually fill in as time goes on. But the document you're looking at, the construction fund, there's really no surprises in there at all. It tracks as we were projecting. There might be a little bit over, a little bit under. I think it's important to note that we had about 25 out of both accounts, or both funds, we had about 25 million last year in loans. Anna has indicated to me that the board might expect to see as much as $50 million. $50 million in the next two board meetings. So it could get a little aggressive here as we start the next fiscal year, or this current fiscal year. The items down towards the bottom of the page are those booked as part of the projects bill, leaving us about $8 million to start the year. And that number obviously will rise as revenue comes in from loans and repayment and the federal mineral lease and things like that. So I guess my point is we're in good shape, and I'll show you on the screen here when we get to the budget side how that starts looking for the current fiscal year. To flip the page, the severance tax, again, not a lot of surprises. It starts lining out very similar to what we were projecting in the most recent projections. We do have a considerable amount of more severance tax revenue that has come in than what was projected, which is just good news for us, more money that we can loan out. And so at the I'm expecting the end of the fiscal year, which was June 30th of this last month, to show about 35 million. A reminder, Steve Biondo, the finance section accounts manager, presents the audited financials in November each year. And so between now and then, some of these numbers may get refined as to how the auditors look at things. But all in all, good shape at the end of the year. Now I want to talk what's on the screen. And I apologize, I had a document to hand out, but I had a cell that was not added correctly before I left the office and made some printouts, and I didn't want to hand that out. It wasn't accurate enough to show in the budget sense. So what you've got on the screen is really the first year of the handout that I would have provided, and we start looking at a 3-year model. And so the fiscal year we're in right now, on the screen you'll see I've got the construction fund on the left, severance tax on the right, and a lot of this is based on history, projections that we receive for federal mineral lease and severance tax from the June 2017 projections. Typical principal and interest that gets repaid, that number is typically about 30 million when you add the two accounts together. And we expect that to be fairly consistent. I shared with you that Aurora repaid their loan. Their $60 million loan a year ago about now. So that money now sits in Treasury at 1% interest as opposed to 3.5% interest when it was in their hands. So there are some adjustments that get made to some of these as time goes on. Again, we hope to move that out to Northern and that 90 million Windy Gap project in the near future. Again, not a lot of significant changes. I can produce about $70 million in loan funds, of which Anna has indicated maybe we could see as much as 50 million here in the next couple of board meetings. The next installment of the $25 million water plan grant funding here in this item, that seems to be relatively secure. I think I've shared with the board that when we originally laid this out, it was based on a lot of projections and assumptions, and if everything continued to flow as we anticipated, we would be able to successfully fund that in fiscal year 17-18, and then possibly one more year, but after that it got real fuzzy. And so the next slide I'll show you, we can fund it again with a lot of these same assumptions. This particular end of the year, we're showing that with the two accounts running about 15-16 million if all this plays out. Well, this doesn't go to the next page. So this would be the equivalent of this would be fiscal year 18-19, a very similar approach. There are different projections that come in for severance tax and federal mineral lease that I've inserted. An assumption about $50 million next year. We typically say we can do 40 to 60 million each year. As I indicated, we did 25 last year. We could do maybe 70 next year. And again, here's the continuation of the water plant funding at 25 million. I know it shows a negative here. It tends to balance out. We have a choice to take loans out of either fund. However, the opportunity exists, leaving about 10 million at the end of next fiscal year. And this being fiscal year 19-20, it continues to get a little bit further out, a little bit grayer in what we assume. I have inserted $40 million for severance tax revenues. That's what I typically use as an average over the last 8 years or so. We're fortunate on the loan program side. We invest that. We don't spend it until we have it. And so I've inserted some assumptions in both that and federal mineral lease, again, having reserved about $60 million available for new loans. And now we get into this question of whether we have enough money for $25 million for a continuation of water plant funding, because now we're getting closer to not having enough to take care of the normal business. So that was all I had to present on the finances. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Kirk? No, I don't think so. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, before we move to agenda item 23, Andrew, would you do me a favor? Could we get some air in here, if there's possible? Or either that, or just open the doors in the back. I don't know if I'm the only one that's kind of dying here, but no. I think that might make it worse. All right, let's move on to 23.
Words you want to hear before you present? I think I'm dying here. Sweet. All right, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff, presenting agenda item 23A. This is a loan request to the Consolidated Ditch and Headgate Company for the Consolidated Diversion and Headgate Replacement. They're seeking a $1 million loan, and this will be a 30-year loan term at 1.8%. That is the ag rate. And you can see where they're located on the grand scheme of things down in the Rio Grande Basin. Scott Schaefer is the president with the Ditch Company. He is with us in the audience, as well as Emma Resor. She's executive director for the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project. They're both here to be able to answer any questions as the board may see fit after my presentation.
Could you repeat those two gentlemen's names, if you would, please?
Repeat what? I'm sorry.
Their names.
Oh, yes,
Please.
Scott Schaefer, and he is the president with the Ditch Company, and Emma Resor, the executive director with the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project.
Thanks. Please proceed.
The Ditch Company is located near Monte Vista, and here's kind of showing the outline of their ditch system. And really, they're more of a carrier ditch. So they provide the water that is diverted off of their diversion gets split into 9 different ditches. One of the ditches is the pace ditch. It's right at the headgate that's diverted into the pace. and the 8 others are downstream, as can be seen here at this schematic. The Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project, they're the group that's a part of this project. They really started in 2001. There was a study done looking at the headwaters of the Rio Grande, looking how to restore, which is how they got their name. And their mission is to restore and conserve really this stretch of the river, looking at water quality, agricultural water use, riparian health, wildlife, aquatic species habitat, and the recreation and community safety. Really a whole holistic approach at what is the river at, how can we improve it. And part of what they're looked at is the aging infrastructure that these ditch companies were working with. And how can they step in to help these ditch companies to do a comprehensive project for a rebuild. The programs that the project does are seen here on the bottom right. So again, riparian restoration, stream bank stabilization, in-stream infrastructure improvement. These are the diversion ditches along this stretch of the river. Watershed stewardship and outreach and education. This ditch, the consolidated ditch, is located again between Del Norte and Monte Vista, and it's inside of this 2001 study area that was done. Zooming in a little bit closer to where this ditch lies, you can see them down at the bottom right, circled with the red. That's the consolidated / pace diversion, since the pace ditch also uses this diversion structure. Upstream of them is the Monte Vista Canal diversion, and then just a little upstream of that is the McDonald diversion and Prairie diversion. I wanted to highlight those because those are projects that the Restoration Project has done in coordination with the McDonald Ditch Company and the Prairie Ditch Company. Both of those were accomplished through a CWCB loan to the ditch companies and a WSRA grant to the Restoration Project. The McDonald diversion has been successfully completed, and I highlight the diversion structure here for them as the consolidated diversion structure will mimic this design. NRCS is the design engineer, and by and large are going to use the same proven design also on the consolidated structure. The Prairie diversion, I've highlighted the trash rack, which is in the foreground, and then the diversion head gates in the background. And the consolidated project will similarly use a lot of the design from the trash rack and head gate of the Prairie. So if you look at those two projects, you can kind of get an idea of what the final project for consolidated will look like. Moving on to the consolidated, the project task to the ditch company really is replacing the diversion, replacing their head gate. Get something that works. It's a lot more efficient. Currently, every year they have to go into the river and pile up some riprap and debris to help push the water over. And so that's the ditch company's real outcome for this project. But the ditch company also wanted to do a comprehensive project, and that's where they were able to approach the Restoration Project and say, hey, how can you help us to do something better? And so the design now that they have the Restoration Project involved is including things such as a radial sluice gate to help the ditch company, including a fish ladder that they're working with Parks and Wildlife to get a proper design of what fish ladder would work here. Their structure will allow for boat passage. They're also going to look at stabilizing the stream banks up and downstream of this project and restore the riparian habitat. So really they're trying to do a comprehensive project at this location. And here's a rough schematic of the design. So again, the river is flowing, I guess, from the picture up to down. This diversion dam, sluice, and fish passage will look very similar to the McDonald ditch head gate, which I showed you, or diversion structure. And then a trash rack off the river down to a new head gate structure, which will look a lot like the Prairie trash rack and head gate. And also the Pace ditch here, they currently have their head gate sort of tied into the diversion structure. In this scenario, their head gate will also be tied into the head gate for the consolidated ditch. The financials of this is that the Restoration Project kind of is overseeing the whole project, and the landowner's cost right now, 100% of it will be taken care of through this loan. And that is approximately 54% of the total project cost. There's also NRCS grant money that is taking up a large chunk of the cost as well. And so what this approval is for a $1 million loan to the ditch company, which will cover 100% of the ditch company's cost. They're also seeking a WSRA grant that was recently approved at the last roundtable for the Rio Grande, and it will be coming forward to the board in September as part of a 5-ditch project. If that is approved, that $400,000 of grant for this project will be used to reduce the loan. So if the grant's approved, the loan will cover 60% of landowner's cost. The reason for presenting to you now instead of in September along with the grant is that the NRCS money is tied to a schedule, and construction must start this fall for the ditch company. So receiving the $1 million loan now will give them the financial assurance that they can go forward even if the grant does not. And again, at the end, if the grant does get approved, that will then simply lessen the amount of loan they end up having to get dispersed from CWCB. So looking at a financial summary, which is assuming the full $1 million loan, again, it's 1.8, which is the ag rate for 30 years. The annual obligation is $48,252. That includes a 10% reserve for the first 10 years. The ratios indicate that they are strong to average borrower, and their existing share assessment of $8.50 would have to be increased to $13, again, under the full $1 million loan scenario. Collateral for this project will be assessment revenues backed by rate covenant of the ditch company, and then the project itself, which will be the diversion dam and headgate structure. And again, at the bottom I have there, just as a reminder, there is a $400,000 grant request that will be heard in September, but this loan approval will assume that it does not take that into account. And so with that, my presentation is finished, and I will see if the board has questions for me or if Scott and Emma.
Questions for Jonathan? Scott, Emma, would you like to address the board?
I'm Scott Schaefer, the president. I want to thank you guys for your consideration on this loan. It's nothing like the last minute. We've been working on this for, I don't know, almost 6 years. And, you know, we've had all this time. We went through different scenarios. And finally, all of a sudden, we're going to start. But we've got to get this loan. We have to have everything in place. So we're kind of rushing to get this done. And I want to hand it to you guys. I'm used to maybe a 3 or 4 hour meeting, you know, board meeting, but you guys are doing it for 2 days. That's pretty good. I don't know if I could sit that long. But anyway, yeah, it's just like Jonathan said, we have to get out in that river 2 or 3 times during the summer to move gravel. And I mean, just think of people who, you know, the wildlife and everything we're disturbing, you know, with that. And then the river, then it rains and it washes it out, and then we have to get back in. And it's an old structure. It needs to be replaced. And if we don't do it now, it's eventually going to go completely out, and then it's going to cost us a lot more money. So, and another thing, we have, I don't know if you failed to mention, we have saved some money too over this last few years. Well, the 5 years that we've been doing it, we've assessed ourselves, and so we do have some money to add to this if we need to. So anyway, thank you.
Any questions for Scott? Thank you for making the trip over today. Please proceed, Jonathan. Staff recommendation.
Yes, staff recommendation is as is presented in the memo.
Director Dutton.
I've been really, really excited about this all day long, so I guess it's good it's at the end of the day because I've been on the edge of my seat. This is a really, for us, it's going to have a huge impact for, as Jonathan said, for 9 ditch companies and also for the health of the Rio Grande itself. And so Scott and Emma being here, I think, shows the significance of this project, and I would move that we support staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Dutton, second by Director Yon, I believe, to move staff recommendation, agenda item 23A. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 23B.
All right, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff, for the record, presenting agenda item 23B. This is a loan request for the ditch system improvements project by the Church Ditch Water Authority. They are seeking a loan in the amount of $3.58 million. This will be a 30-year loan term at a blended interest rate of 3%. Is the general manager of the authority, and he is in the audience and available for questions after my presentation. The Church Ditch Water Authority, the authority was created in 2004, but the Church Ditch was really established in 1865, and it is owned by North Glen and Westminster. So it is a separate entity than the actual cities, and they have no taxing power, so they are not, Tabor is not applicable to them, which is lucky for me when I do my financial review. The authority, again, is owned fully by North Glen and Westminster, and they have 97 contractual users. These are different than a shareholder, which a typical ditch company would have, where shareholders are the true water right owners and the owners of the company. In this case, they're just simply contractual users that have the contractual right to receive water they lease from the authority. In 2009, the authority completed a master plan which really looked top to bottom all systems of their ditch system. Where do we need help? What needs fixing? What needs improvements? Listed are all the different existing conditions assessments that they looked at. The report also included some recommendations and prioritization of improvements. Since 2009, they've been trying their best to go through the report and do the projects they can. In 2013, they had a more or less pause on that as they were impacted by the 2013 flood. And the authority did receive an emergency loan from CWCB. Quick information on that loan, they're approved for $600,000. We dispersed almost all of that loan, and they have been able to pay down the principal, the $360,000, using the FEMA prepayments they've received so far. They do expect to receive some more FEMA prepayments. They've recently hired a project closeout consultant to assist them through the closeout process of FEMA. But as of yet, they have not been able to schedule their project closeout meeting where FEMA will finalize their reimbursement. So as of right now, they have a balance remaining on that of about $231,000, and their first annual payment will be due in this December. The projects that they're looking at now, they are described in the board memo, but they are the laid-in flushing structure, Headgate 53 retaining wall, Area 15 lining, 4th Street siphon, and the Legacy Farms culvert. Again, these are projects that were either included in the 2009 master plan or have come to light since then, such as the flood and other repairs that they've had to make. So the laid-in flushing structure, it's simply an old structure. It's been able to work up till now. As with any older structure, it's losing efficiency. Safety is not at all where it should be. The other side of this bridge here, which has no railing, is about a 25-foot drop down the chute there. So it's a little nerve-wracking as the ditch rider is trying to open and close that gate. So this project will replace the structure, all new structure, new head walls, new access bridge, bring safety up to code, replace the stop logs that they're still using with gates, and overall will greatly improve the safety, reduce maintenance on this, and will also improve the water quality. Again, this is a flushing structure for their ditch. 53 retaining wall. This retaining wall was actually built in response of the 2013 flood. It was an emergency maintenance project, so they did what they could. Now, as a couple season has come, they've realized the importance of proper drainage behind a wall, stair-stepping the wall. And so they've now been able to settle down from the flood, look at a true engineered solution rather than just stacking concrete blocks at will. And so this project is sort of redoing the emergency project just to make it an actual project. Area 15 ditch lining. This is an area of the ditch which they see more seepage than other parts of their ditch. Since, again, this ditch has been around since the late 1800s.
houses, churches, the other developments that are right along this Area 15 reach. They didn't exist at the time. Now they have houses there. They have a lot of pumping from the sump pumps of the houses, which is just further exacerbating the seepage. And so they're looking at lining this 1 mile stretch. They have lined other portions of their ditch, and they're looking to use the same design that they've used elsewhere and they've seen proven elsewhere in their ditch, which is this PVC liner and then concrete blocks on the side to shore it up. The 4th Street siphon is at the very upstream of their diversion structure. If you're familiar with Golden, the Coors Brewery is just right about here. And so this project it's just an old siphon. They haven't yet been able to do a full inspection design on this, but everyone with the ditch isn't expecting an inspection to say anything more than this is a poor structure that's aging and is in danger of collapsing. So they're going to look at slip lining the existing pipe. They will be to make sure that it maintains capacity as they slip line it. And new inlet and new outlet for the siphon. The Legacy Farms culvert, this is an area of a bottleneck along their ditch system. They see that that water can back up while they're trying to run their full allotted amount. And this was installed back in 2010 as emergency maintenance project again. And they've just discovered that the pipe they selected simply was too small. And so now they've been able to sit down, put some engineering on paper, figure out the right size, and they're now going to replace this. They also receive a lot of stormwater runoff from this road, and so they're leaving in the bypass channel that's there now, and that will help route the stormwater through. So in total, all 5 projects add up to that $3.58 million. Rather than seeking 5 individual loans, they're seeking 1 to consolidate it all, which we support. This fall, they're looking at constructing the Layden Creek and the Headgate 53. They will complete the inspection of the 4th Street siphon, and the next fall they will do the remaining projects. So this will be about a 2-year project. Financial summary is they are seeking a loan for the full amount, 100% of the project cost. Again, this is a 3% blended interest rate, and the annual loan obligation will be about $203,000. The ratios indicate that they are a strong borrower. They had already increased their assessments kind of in anticipation of this project. And our financial analysis shows that they won't have to increase their assessments anymore to handle this debt service. The collateral will be assessment revenues with rate covenant and the 4th Street siphon. Our typical standard is the project itself. In this case, it didn't seem to make sense to us to have all 5 individual projects get legal descriptions for all of them. And the 4th Street siphon being at the upstream of their ditch, 99% of the water goes through this siphon, and so we're recommending the collateral as the 4th Street siphon. And with that, I will leave it to the board if you have any questions for me or for Nathan.
Questions for Jonathan? I don't think so. Nathan would, I'm sorry, Director Wells.
I didn't see in the description of any of these 5 projects any improvement to the environment, but just sort of, I mean, maybe it's just not described, but the descriptions were, you know, concrete, new concrete. And so I don't know, I'm just wondering, is there any improvement to riparian habitat or something in addition to just the infrastructure itself?
One thing to keep in mind is that all of these ditch improvements are along the ditch system itself and aren't touching the river corridor. So riparian habitat usually, I don't think exists much through ditch systems that the community hasn't converted it kind of into a riparian area. So with like the flushing structure here, this is a big infrastructure one. The work is largely done just replacing the structure as is. But through the ditch system, fish habitat isn't typically something that's desired for the ditch company.
Other questions for Jonathan? I don't think so. Nathan, would you like to address the board?
And like the last ditch company, just want to thank you guys for your consideration of taking a look at the 5 projects that we want to get underway to continue the consistent rehabilitation that we've been working on the ditch, and some of the smaller projects like Jonathan mentioned that we've taken care of slowly since 2009. Probably a common theme when you talk to ditch companies. We don't work at breakneck speed, that's for sure, with a limited budget. Also want to thank Jonathan for putting together the presentation and presenting it. I think he did a great job at covering everything we're looking to achieve with these projects. Thank you.
Any questions for Nathan? Thanks for making the trip over here. We do appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's not a bad place to come.
No, it's very nice. We have staff recommendation before us. Director Yon.
This looks like a good project, and I'm always for improvements in the irrigation system. So with that, I would make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Second by Director Wells to move staff recommendation, agenda item 23B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Should be to item 23C.
Good afternoon, Anna Moss, CWCB Finance Staff for the record. This is item 23C. It's a loan request from Corsentino Dairy Farms for the Jolita Dam rehabilitation. Brett Corsentino is the borrower, and he's not going to be here today, but he is available by phone if we do have questions for him, and I believe he's actually listening in online if everything's working okay. So this is a $94,000 project. The loan amount will be 90% of that, so a little over $85,000. We're looking at a 10-year term, a restricted interest rate, blended with ag, comes down to a 0.5% interest. So this particular project site is about 3 miles east of Walsenburg. And the Corsentino Dairy is around 1,000 acres. It's been in the family for 4 generations since the mid-1930s. And Mr. Corsentino changed it to an organic dairy in 2011, so that's kind of a newer operation for him. The primary source of water is actually wells, and he uses this Jolita reservoir to augment those wells. He does have a permanent plan for augmentation that was approved in 2014, and it's really critical to his dairy operation to keep that augmentation plan going. So I do want to note that the reservoir itself is actually owned by the Jolita Ditch and Reservoir Company. Mr. Corsentino is 93% of the ditch company. His neighbor is 7%, but this is so critical to his operation. He's just moving forward with this on his own as a sole borrower. So the reservoir itself was built in 1889, and it has a fairly long history of noncompliance with the SEO since the actually mid-1970s. So they're under a storage restriction right now. And if no repairs are made by this December, a breach order will be issued. And that just won't work for Mr. Corsentino, because if that happens, he won't be able to farm anymore. So this is really important to him. Through this project, the reservoir rehab will preserve about 274 acre-feet of water. He did have Nick Cook, a professional engineer. He's retired at NRCS, was kind enough to donate his time and efforts to work on the design with Mr. Corsentino. He also worked with a local contractor to get this cost estimate, so I feel pretty good about the $94,000 cost estimate. So the work includes a new core to the dam. They're going to grout a pipeline that goes through the dam and then also build a new spillway. So on this, a little bit of background on the dairy. I mentioned it's a family-run operation. They have 3 board members. It's Brett Corsentino and his parents. And for this, we consider that a closely held corporation, and that's important when we look at the collateral for a project. Revenues into the dairy are from milk and cow sales. And I do want to mention that in 2006, they did unfortunately go through a Chapter 12 bankruptcy and restructured. And truthfully, when I learned this, I thought this is really not a good fit for us. It's a little risky, and probably he should just look somewhere else for a loan. And I started making calls. One of the first calls was to Mark Perry, dam safety engineer, and this has been on his radar for a while. He kind of wants it off of his list. I ended up then calling Steve Woody, the Division 2 engineer, and we had a long conversation about this. And I'm going to give you a little bit more background on it just because I think it's important to understand part of Mr. Corsentino's story. So what happened is he inherited this farm from his family. And what Mr. Woody shared with me is Brett is working really hard to save this farm and keep it in operation. And so effectively, there was some coal-based methane that was producing water in the Walsenburg area a number of years ago. So there was more water coming down the Arkansas River than the Corsentinos had ever seen. So they were super happy about this. Irrigating, they thought life was really good. Unfortunately, there was a lot of contaminants in that water. And ultimately, they had to, it basically sterilized their farm. So they had to haul off all this topsoil, bring in all new material, sell off all of their entire herd of cattle, and so basically start over from square one. And so that was kind of a story that tugged on my heart a little bit. And I thought, okay, well, let's go meet with Mr. Corsentino. So I went down and met with him and talked to him, and you can just tell he's working really hard to keep this thing moving forward. So that's why we're here. So again, the project itself is $94,000. Because it's a private borrower, we're requesting that he does put in 10% on the front end. So we limit our loan to the $84,000. The interest rate is probably the best rate I've seen around here. We started with our ag interest rate of 1.8%. We knocked 0.8% off because it's a 10-year term. And that was part of my pushing to say, hey, it's a little bit risky. Let's shorten the term to shorten our, we're out there for. And then because it's a restricted reservoir, it's another 0.5% off of that. So it's a really, really good interest rate. So his annual loan payment comes to $8,781 a year. And we also have a requirement in our loan contracts that says that for the first 10 years, you have to set aside 1/10 of an annual loan payment. So you have a sort of a rainy day reserve fund. In this case, because it is only a 10-year note, I was a little bit worried about it. We've asked him to set aside one annual loan payment in reserve before we disperse any funds, and he's agreed to that. So he does have existing debt with Community Banks of Colorado. Started off at 1.9 million, he's down to 1.2 million. And the collateral on that is the land and the water rights. So I did call the bank and had a conversation with them. I read through all of those contract documents, and there was a clause in there that said if he takes on additional debt, it needs to be approved by the bank. And so the bank wasn't interested in lending for this particular project, but they indicated they would approve this additional debt. They just want to review our loan contracts once we have those in place. So with that, the security for our loan, I mentioned it's a closely held corporation, and so we do require 110% of the loan amount in hard collateral. Because the bank already has that first lien on this, I went through their appraisal. The estimated value, I think we can all agree, an appraisal is really just a, it's a good estimate, but it's not like it's a set number. But that estimated value came in at $1,455,000. So it gives them around $250,000 in equity. So that's, well in excess of what we'd be needing in a collateral for our loan. So the security of this will be the land and the water rights, but it will be a second position lien, which is a variance from our policy. And truthfully, this one did give me a lot of heartburn, but as I thought through all of this and met with him and read through his story and talked to other folks in the area, it just felt like this is the right thing to do. We're trying to help him stay farming. And so with that, I'll gladly answer questions. Then we can also call Mr. Corsentino if you'd like.
Questions for Anna? Director Goebel.
It's obvious Anna's done her homework on this project. I think especially for a relatively small loan amount, she's done a lot of work on it and feels pretty comfortable with it. And I think with the storage restriction and the chance of losing almost 300 acre foot of storage for this dairy and it being pretty critical, well, absolutely critical to the life of the dairy, I think it's important. So if there's no more discussion, I'll move to approve staff's recommendation.
We have a motion to move staff recommendation by Director Goebel, second by Director Wells. Discussion. Actually, I would like to have a little discussion right now. Anna is way too modest to do this, but to me, this is a big deal, and it's not about the money. This is about loaning money based upon financials and character. And that really distinguishes between the good loan officers and the really great loan officers. So I'll be right on, Anna. This to me really is a big deal. And I don't think Brett is really, I'm not sure he knows just how lucky he is to have run into you, because this doesn't happen very often. So anyway, enough of that. That was really good work. Any other discussion? I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Oh, wait a minute. Let's go back. We have Motion by Director Goebel, second by Director Wells to move staff recommendation 23C. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 23D.
Okay, again, Anna Moss for the record. This is your last one of the day, so congratulations. So this is a loan request from the City of Walsenburg for City Lake Dam Rehabilitation and Enlargement Project. And I want to thank, we've got a row of folks here in the audience. We've got the Mayor, Jim Ecker, David Harriman, he is the Public Works Director, and Mark Ellis is the Finance Director. So this has a total project cost of about $6.8 million, and they are looking to finance 100% of the project cost over a 30-year loan at an interest rate of 2%. So I'm sure you've all been through Walsenburg at some point in your journeys across Colorado. It's located south of Pueblo, just a touch west of I-25. It has a population of around 3,000 people. And so the city does operate through a water activity enterprise. It has 5 reservoirs and a water treatment plant. And the treatment plant, it sits just downstream of the dam at City Lake Dam. And so as such, it really acts as a forebay to their treatment plant. It's a really critical component to their water rights system. City Lake has a storage decree of about 412 acre feet. And recent SEO inspections have identified deficiencies due to seepage and an inadequate spillway. In fact, I've been talking with the city through different iterations of staff over many, many years about this project. So I'm happy that we're here today. They are under a storage restriction. It's currently at a 1-foot restriction, and it increases to 2 feet in a year and then 3 feet if they don't do any additional work. So as a result, in working with the city and trying to get this off of the restricted list, they did receive a $49,000 feasibility study grant from us. Let's see, I think it was last December, actually, we just executed that. So they looked at different alternatives. One of them was just rehabbing. Another was looking at enlarging. And the cost to enlarge really wasn't a dramatic difference. They also have some recently acquired new water rights they want to put into the system. So they chose to go with the enlargement option. And I do want to note that when they made this decision, it was at about a 30% feasibility study design cost estimate. I talked to their engineer last week. The costs have gone up a little bit. And I wouldn't generally mention that, except for you're going to see this again. So this one is going to come in front of you for a water plan grant for that storage category. So you will see it again, and the numbers will be just a little bit different. I also want to give you just a touch of a background that CWCB did do a grant to the Cataris Basin Collaborative Storage Study. This was a study that looked at different storage options along the Cataris River. And as a result, City Lake Dam was identified, or City Lake Reservoir was identified as a great storage site for the collaborative. And initially, the city said, you know what, this is our reservoir. We don't really have an interest in letting other folks store in it. There's been a change in administration, and part of it was they had a history of maybe making a bad deal in the past and kind of losing out on some of their own water they thought they owned, or storage they thought they owned. So anyway, there's been a shift in administration. They're now having conversations about, with the collaborative, about how this new storage could be used. And so I'm pleased to share with you that I do actually have letters of support from both the Basin Roundtable and the Horfano County Water Conservancy District for this project. And so I think that's a good step forward. This was actually supposed to be in front of you at our May board meeting. It got tabled at the last minute. So, so we've made a lot of progress in the last 2 months here. So the construction on this, they want to remove the existing dam. They'll build it generally in the same spot, just raising the crest by 3 feet. And you can see it does sit right along Highway 160 here. So this footprint will move a little bit, but it's a critical one for safety issues because it sits right on that highway. Project cost at the original estimate was about $6.8 million. They are applying for 100% financing. We did talk about maybe reducing that ask, knowing that they're coming in for that water plan grant, but also with that variable of construction costs, they thought let's just stay here just as a little bit of a contingency factor. So the interest rate, they qualify for low-income municipal. We take another 0.5% off for the for the restricted reservoir interest rate rather. So that becomes 2% for 30 years. Their annual loan payments will be about $307,000. They do have an existing debt with a water revenue bond, and that will have parity when we go through contracting. So this one, the security will be our standard pledge of revenues for for a municipal borrower. And then this is the language. I wanted to share this with you. So I got letters both from the Roundtable and the Huerfano County Water Conservancy District saying that they do support this, but it's a conditional support. And two things to note are, one, that it is on the master needs list of the basin implementation plan. So that's good to know. And then it's also on the needs list for this collaborative storage study. And so they said, basically, it's on the fact that this additional storage above 412 acre feet, the collaborative and the roundtable want to make sure that that's available to other water users for reasonable cost and reasonable term. And so truthfully, they had asked me to put that as a condition in our loan. I wasn't comfortable having that language in our loan contract, primarily because it's really hard for me to decide what's a reasonable cost and reasonable term. I believe that's for the city to work out with the collaborative with other water users. So I wanted just to mention that's out there, but I do want you to know that they are working towards that, definitely. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm sure the city would happily answer questions if you have any.
Questions for Anna? I don't believe so. Director Goebel.
Thank you, Anna. The Caceres Storage Collaborative Study did, I guess, confirm the great lack of storage in the Caceres Basin. And so that combined with the potential loss of additional storage with this storage restriction and the fact that the collaborative seems to be communicating again and looks like they're going to be moving forward in a positive direction. Unless there's other discussion, I move to approve staff's recommendation.
Right. We have a motion on the floor by Director Goebel, second by Director McLeod. Discussion at this point in time, we can have discussion. Would Dave and Mark, would you like to address the board for anything, or? Okay.
I'm James Ector. I'm the mayor of Walsenburg. I appreciate all your efforts in listening to, and when I came into the position 4 years ago, we've had multiple projects and stuff and non-compliance from the state, and this is one of our major concerns that we need to get fixed. And like presented, the Caceres River, it needs additional storage. There's a lot of need for that, and that's why this project has been at the top of our list. Thank you for listening to our.
Thank you for being here today. We have the motion on the floor with the second. Call for the vote. All those in, wait a minute. We have staff recommendation to approve agenda item 23D. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I believe we are done for the day, Director Mitchell? All right. We are in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.